We do not hate the Dutch enough. I am 3 chapters into this book and I despise the Dutch with all of my heart. We do not hate them enough. Some of us who are minorities, maybe from like the South Asian diaspora who weren't as affected by the Dutch, do not hate them enough for the things they did. This book, all about Indonesia, but other places as well, what they did to the Indonesians is just as despicable as the British, and even to this day they openly brag about it. They want that empire back more than the British do. More than the British want that empire back. The Dutch want it back. It is despicable. The only good thing to come out of the Netherlands is Johan Cruyff, and even that is simply because he had a fantastic gift of football, nothing to do with him being Dutch. We do not hate the Dutch enough. This is what I said the first time I spoke about Revolusi, and actually I stand by that. But we also do not hate the Japanese enough, and we do not hate the British enough. Oh no, I'm gonna have people say you're not British in my comments. So, oh my god, the Netherlands occupying, colonizing Indonesia, stealing their resources, killing their people, arresting their political leaders. Their political leaders keep trying to fight for at least a form of, like, not even independence, but self-governance. And the Dutch are like, no, it ain't giddy. Don't know how the Dutch sound, like Donald Trump. And then the Japanese come, the Japanese invade. The Dutch are like, the Indonesians will definitely fight the Japanese. And the Indonesians are like, no, why would we fight them? You were our colonizers. The Japanese do some, they're nice to them for a bit, and then the Japanese start doing just the heinous, disgusting stuff that they did in the rest of Asia, in Indonesia, particularly taking girls and using them as comfort women, and even boys, using them as comfort tools for their soldiers. And also, they tried to create their own militias. And then the Japanese lost the war, and then the British came. Well, the Dutch were like, we're gonna waltz back in and recolonize Indonesia. And at this point, Indonesia were like, no, the fuck you're not. And then the Dutch were like, we should get the Americans to help us recolonize Indonesia. And then the Americans were like, no. Well, these Americans were like, that's not our problem. The British can do it. And then the British were like, fucking listen, look, I'm Mountbatten, I touching kids, getting blown up by the RRA, let's go, that's great to see. And then the Dutch are like, we're gonna go right in, we're gonna kill the Indonesians and take back our colony. And the Indonesians rightfully said no. And now the Dutch see the Indonesians' resistance as a bad thing, still to this day. And yes, the Indonesians did some heinous stuff, but that's the Dutch colonized them, made them feel little, made them feel subservient for hundreds of years. And the Japanese came and were like, you guys shouldn't do that. And they were like, bet, we're not going to do that anymore. And the Dutch still to this day are like, we can't believe they resisted our colonization, guys. What do you mean they didn't want to be our subjects and have us steal all their wealth and resources and not give them any rights? What do you mean? We do not hate the Dutch enough. Okay, this is likely the last video I make on the book Revolusi. I highly recommend you read it. But, yeah, the Dutch. Like, I got a bunch of Dutch people hate me in my comments being like, no one thought like this afterwards. No one supported it. And, like, the book details how, like, 30 years after Indonesian independence, the Dutch were, like, sending death threats to whistleblowers, to guys who are like, yeah, I not only saw but participated in crimes against humanity. And then the Dutch public were like, how dare you say that? You're a coward, you're a traitor. Like, okay. Then it wasn't until I think 2016 where the Dutch started acknowledging some of their war crimes, not all of them, and even then they were sweeping a bunch under the rug. The Dutch are just like the British. Like the British rightfully hated for their colonialism. The two places I think that are underhated, the Netherlands and Belgium. I'm going to read the author's book on Belgian colonialism as well. I just need to get through some other books before I get to that. But genuinely, like, we do not hate the Dutch enough. We do not hate the Americans enough. Also, this does talk about the Jakarta method very briefly. There is a book completely about the Jakarta method, which I also want to read at some point. But I got too many books to read right now, so I will get to that. But yes, we do not hate the Dutch enough, because listening to the accounts from Dutch soldiers as to what they and their compatriots did in Indonesia is insane. And this is coming from the Dutch soldiers. It's not coming from Indonesians saying that this is what happened. It's not even coming from mixed Indonesian Dutch people saying what happened. It's coming from the Dutch soldiers as to what they happened. And again, they were soldiers. They weren't the ragtag sort of militia that the Indonesians had. The Indonesians did eventually have a formal army, but they were still relatively ragtag compared to the Dutch army, who, again, and also the war was the Dutch going back on multiple agreements that they had with the Indonesians. They had about 3 to 4 years of agreements set in place, and the Dutch were like, no, we want more, we want more. Sounds a lot like most dying colonial empires. Kind of sounds like the United States right now. We don't hate the Dutch enough. And I'm going to get some more death threats from Dutch people in my comments and my DMs. So, Netherlands bad? I don't want that to be the only thing you take away from this book. Yes, the Netherlands did horrible, evil things. Their allies helped them do horrible, evil things. The Japanese did horrible, evil things to the people of where is now Indonesia. But the people of Indonesia fought and they struggled and they grasped onto their freedom. Despite the colonization, despite the infighting, which always happens in revolutionary movements, despite all of that, they struggled to get their freedom. Was it a perfect struggle? No struggle is ever perfect. Was it a perfect outcome? Probably not. No, especially given the political upheavals that came shortly thereafter, when the United States basically killed all of the communists, alongside the dictatorship. Was Indonesia perfect when they, went forward after that? Definitely not. The genocide in East Timor? No. But in the struggle for independence, at every step of the way, the Dutch tried their damnedest to not allow that independence to happen. Even the Japanese came in, and it was propaganda for them to say, we are here to liberate you, we are here as an anti-colonial mission. They were only there to get the oil from Indonesia because the United States wouldn't give them oil. The Indonesian people struggled against these major powers, against the Dutch, against the Japanese, against the Americans, against the British, and then they came out with their own state. The first, decolonization, through that sort of method. It was the first proper war for independence that we saw, post World War II. It was the wave that allowed the rest of the countries to follow. And then things like Bantung that came afterwards, basically being something that even to this day revolutionaries look at and be like, this is something that can inspire us to fight for what we want. The Netherlands sucked. The people in the Netherlands who still want the empire, who still glorify their empire, suck. But the Indonesian people fought for their liberation. Do not forget that. I know I said we don't hate the Dutch enough, but the Indonesians fought and struggled.